Jurassic Park is not like any other movie. Okay, sure, there are a lot of dinosaur movies out there where the characters need to survive and escape, but I'll stand on the fact that it was and still is the peak of how to do a dinosaur movie correctly. However, if the park was filled with realistic dinosaurs and a similar path of events were to occur, do you think you could survive? G'day everybody, I hope you're doing well. Today we'll be going through your chances of surviving a realistic Jurassic Park. Before we get started, I wanted to pay my respects to Sam Neill. As I'm sure many of you would agree, he raised generations of dinosaur enthusiasts, with many going into the paleontological field because of him. Of course, he was infinitely more than the roles that he played, and I give my condolences to his loved ones. This video in a sense honors part of his legacy by revisiting the film that inspired so many of us to begin with. So in this hypothetical scenario, Jurassic Park goes pretty much the same except for two key changes. The first of which is that Dr. Henry Wu ended up cracking a near-perfect cloning process producing accurate dinosaurs. The other change is that it would be the average person like you or I being placed on the island and then being put through multiple scenarios that the different characters had to experience. Also, important note, I'll be swapping up the raptor species throughout just to keep it fresh. But with all that said, let's get started. The first interaction we're becoming a part of is the opening scene when an InGen worker gets mauled by Velociraptor. Well, he will be using the real-world Velociraptor, so hey, I think all things considered, we're starting off pretty easy. If this Velociraptor were to attack you, even in the scenario where a whole group of workers were not there prodding the animal, then you would still be alright. You, I, and pretty much everyone else would be chilling in this scenario. This is mainly considering these raptors grow to around the size of a turkey, so I'm pretty sure a majority of you would be able to handle yourselves. Likely you'd be getting attacked out of a fear response from the raptor. It'd likely lunge at you, biting at anything you could get a hold of, or maybe it'd even jump at you. But your greater size advantage would allow you to pretty handily throw the raptor away, after which you could get yourself out of that cage. Don't get me wrong, you'd be trudging out of that box with quite a few deep cuts, but things could be considerably worse. But for our first scenario, you would earn a survival score of 8 out of 10. The average person would be more than capable of leaving this encounter alive, but they may require some stitching afterwards. On to the next scene, we have the sick Triceratops that our protagonist stopped to examine. Surprisingly, this encounter plays out almost exactly like it does in the movie, and by that I mean you should be pretty safe. The Triceratops we see is heavily sedated, so unless you get far too close or start making sudden movements, it isn't going to be much of a threat. The real danger isn't the sick animal, instead it's the healthy ones. If the rest of the herd spots a group of strange creatures crowding around one of their injured members, they could easily become defensive and charge in to protect it. Still, at this point you would imagine that the park rangers would keep all the other animals away, so you should be okay. I'd give a survival score of 9 out of 10 here. As long as the area has been properly secured and you keep a respectful distance, this would be one of the safest and most fascinating encounters on Isla Nublar. But in saying that, we now move on to arguably the most intense event. This of course being the infamous T-Rex escape scene. How well do you believe you would fare face to face against an angry Tyrannosaur? Unlike in the movie, a scientifically accurate T-Rex doesn't rely on movement to spot you. It has some of the best senses of any terrestrial predator. I mean, its eyesight is excellent, being comparable to that of modern day hawks. Also, its sense of smell can even rival that of vultures. If you did decide to just exit the vehicle and suddenly freeze, well, that would just turn you into a free snack. Now with that in mind, if you hit some high knees and try to run away, could you actually escape? Well, sorry to rain on your parade, but unless you're a professional sprinter, you're going to struggle. If we say that the accurate T-Rex weighed around the same of Rexy, being around 8.4 tons, then it would still be able to move rather quickly for its size. Okay, sure, maybe not as quick as prime Rexy, but still pretty quick. Based on recent studies, a T-Rex of this size would likely be able to move at around 26 kilometers an hour or 16 miles per hour. Bear in mind the average person runs at around 24 to maybe 28 kilometers an hour, and that is for short sprinting. T-Rex is an animal suspected to have a pretty solid level of stamina, meaning that even if you're just faster than it, you might pop out before they do. If you decide to go Gennaro's route of trying to hide in the toilet, well then that just might actually work so long as no one comes knocking on the door. Because let's be honest, a building made out of hay is not going to survive a T-Rex ramming through it. But if you decide to go with the smartest option, this being remaining in the Explorer vehicle, things might honestly be okay. The vehicle itself is unlike anything a T-Rex would be used to, and I don't really think it would enjoy slamming its face against glass and metal for a meal that is smaller than its skull. And to be honest, there's a good chance he won't even know you're in there, just don't touch the flashlight. Here I give a survivability score of 5 out of 10. Really just depends what position you're placed in, but if you have the option, remain in the vehicle. Moving on, we again have a pretty big scene change when we swap out fictional attributes for the real thing. That is right, we're talking about Dennis Nedry's interaction with the Dilophosaurus. The real Dilophosaurus was not a tiny frilled gremlin that would spit out venom into people's eyes. It was a predator that stood at around 2 meters or 6.5 feet tall and reached roughly 6 to 7 meters or 19 to 23 feet in length. That is a far cry from the cougar-sized animal that we saw on screen. More importantly, there is certainly no evidence that it possessed a venom-spitting ability or even had an expandable neck frill. So instead of us trying to play friendly with a small carnivorous dinosaur, we would be staring up at something around the size of a polar bear. In this situation, the issue begins before we would even meet the Dilo, as we would be hopelessly lost in the middle of a tropical storm on Isla Nublar. What happens next entirely depends on the animal's mood. As we know, getting injured in the wild is never something that helps the animal out, so they would avoid conflict when necessary. But what happens if it thinks of you as prey? It would likely remain at a distance for a period of time. If the Dilophosaurus decides to look at you as prey, which it very well might, there isn't much you can actually do about it. Unlike the version we see in the movies, you will not be getting a dramatic warning with the frill opening up like an umbrella. Instead, a real attack would likely be fast and without too much ceremony. And unlike Owen Grady, you are certainly not stopping and choking out this theropod with one hand. Your only real option here is to slowly back away without making yourself look like prey. You have to try look large, spread your hands up with your clothing and hope that the dinosaur believes you aren't worth the effort. Overall, while this scene may be less fantastical than what we see in the movies, it actually becomes infinitely more dangerous. My verdict for this scenario is a survival score of 3 out of 10. If the Dilo decides that you are prey, well then there's nothing you can really do about it. But don't worry, we have a much smoother scene here, and honestly it acts as one of the best examples of how a scientifically accurate Jurassic Park would be more awe-inspiring than terrifying. I'm of course talking about the interaction between Grant, Tim, Lex, and the Brachiosaurus in the tree. Unlike the theropods that we've looked at so far, a scientifically accurate Brachiosaurus would not have any interest in humans. It is of course a gigantic herbivore, so the good news is that you're definitely not on the menu. The bad news is the real danger comes in its sheer size. At over 40 tons, this animal doesn't have to be aggressive to accidentally end you. So unlike Grant in the movie, I would probably recommend not touching it. Just let it enjoy its lunch while you enjoy the greatest wildlife sighting in human history. Here I would give a survival score of 9 out of 10. The Brachiosaurus isn't dangerous because it would want to hurt you, it's dangerous because it's a living fortress. Climbing down the tree, we once again take Dr. Grant's place as we travel through the park. This means one thing: we stumble upon the Gallimimus stampede. This again is a scenario that barely changes with scientifically accurate dinosaurs. Gallimimus was built for speed, and while it wasn't a predator, being caught in the middle of a panicked herd is going to get you trampled. Hundreds of half-ton animals would be charging past you at around 56 kilometers an hour or 34 miles per hour. The smartest thing to do is to do what Grant does, which is to take cover and get out of the way. Of course though, once the herd passes, we see what they're running from, and that is the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Fortunately for you, a realistic T-Rex would likely stay focused on the Gallimimus it already ambushed, rather than suddenly switching targets onto a lone human. As long as you stay off to the side and keep quiet, there is a good chance you'd just simply be ignored. This would give a smooth survival score of 6 out of 10. The biggest challenge to overcome here is the stampede. Now we're on to Robert Muldoon's final hunt. We all know the clever girl scene. Instead of the movie's giant velociraptors, we will instead be dealing with Deinonychus. These are still sizable predators in their own right, just one that would behave far more like an animal. The big reason that Muldoon gets taken out in the film is because the raptors are portrayed as tactical geniuses. A real Deinonychus would certainly be intelligent, but evidence for coordinated pack hunting is pretty weak. In saying that, that doesn't mean you're automatically safe. Imagine you're standing in Muldoon's position and suddenly a 70-kilogram predator bursts out of the long grass beside you. In my opinion, it is a bit of a coin flip. In an open field, you'd probably have a decent chance of spotting it first, but in the dense jungle, the predator has every advantage. If it gets the jump on you before you can react, it's more than capable of overpowering you. Even worse, the commotion could attract another Deinonychus, creating a feeding frenzy similar to that we see in modern Komodo dragons. Here, I've got to cut it straight down the middle and give a survival score of 5 out of 10. If your reaction time is solid, then there's a good chance you can walk away. If not, well then Muldoon might not be the only one saying goodbye. Now we're on to the final scenario in the visitor center. However, this time we'll be swapping out the raptors once again. Instead of Deinonychus, we'll be using Utahraptor, and here that changes quite a lot. Unlike the previous situations where real raptors raptors would actually be smaller than their movie counterparts, Utahraptor is actually larger than the Jurassic Park versions. So how will you be pairing? While the Utahraptor is larger and much better armed, it was almost certainly not the hyper-intelligent, endlessly aggressive predator that was portrayed in the films. Even so, this is arguably the worst raptor that you could possibly encounter on the island. The biggest advantage in your court is the building itself. As long as it doesn't know exactly where you are, you've got a good chance of escaping. The problem is your other advantage from the previous scenarios has now disappeared. Against a Velociraptor or even maybe Deinonychus, there was at least the possibility of fighting back if things went horribly wrong. Against a Utahraptor, that option is gone. It is simply too large. If it catches you in the open, the size difference is just way too much to overcome. Unless you are carrying some sort of weapon, you are not winning the fight. Without a weapon though, your only option is to stay quiet, stay hidden, and let the enclosed environment work its magic. But on the bright side, the movie gives us one more miracle: the T-Rex's arrival. Unlike the film, I don't really think a real T-Rex would charge in there simply because it wanted to be the hero. But hearing all that commotion and finding another large predator in the middle of the visitor center would certainly grab its attention. Whether it sees the Utahraptor as competition, a threat, or even a meal, the result is likely the same. And when seeing that, I highly doubt any other Utahraptor would stick around. The brief distraction which would occur here would give you exactly what you've been waiting for: a chance to finally escape. Here I would have to give a survival score of around 4 out of 10. The only reason this isn't lower is that the T-Rex unintentionally will come and save your life, and you might have access to a weapon. Even then, you would have to hope that you get away without the T-Rex noticing you. And if the T-Rex does not intervene, you would be trapped in the visitor center with a predator that you simply cannot outrun or outlast. And let us be realistic, you cannot hide forever. Eventually you have to try and leave, and if you don't escape in time, the rest of the survivors will leave without you. So after surviving every major encounter on Isla Nublar, how would the average person actually perform? Well, if we average out all the survival scores together, you end up with a percentage of around 60%. The biggest reason the score is so high is that scientifically accurate dinosaurs behave like wild animals, not like movie monsters. However, of course, the dangerous scenarios are still potent. With animals like Dilophosaurus, Utahraptor, and Tyrannosaurus Rex, it would only take one mistake to take you out of the game. The average person would probably survive some encounters easily, while others would require the correct decisions to walk out alive. And with that, we've reached the end of the video, and I hope you've all enjoyed. As always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and comment down below what you'd like to see next. Anyways, I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya, mates.